Hey, what is going down, you hardcore war-torn photography geeks? It's Sam from CameraLegend.com, and I am back with you today with another edition of Tuesday Trends, where we look at the latest trends going on in the camera and photography world. And today's trend is a topic that for some reason has been trending in the past few weeks, but it's actually a topic that's been going on for several years, and that topic is the digital SLR versus mirrorless cameras, or more specifically, is the DSLR about to go extinct? But first, let's take a look at what we are talking about. Okay, so when people think of the good old-fashioned digital SLRs, they probably think of cameras like this. When they think of mirrorless, they probably be looking at cameras like these. Okay, so in the good old days of digital photography, a camera like this, which is the 1DS Mark II from 2004, would probably have been considered the pinnacle of digital camera technology. Of course, there are much better digital SLRs out there today, but I'm just using this one as an example. Now, what is a digital SLR? Well, by definition, a digital SLR is a digital single lens reflex. So the concept of it is basically very similar to the single lens reflex cameras of the film era. For example, you have a prism up there, you have a mirror inside. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but it's a mirror there. Trust me, there's a mirror there. Anyway, okay, so there's a mirror. The mirror reflects an image that goes up to a prism, which comes out of the optical viewfinder. That's what makes it similar to the SLRs of the film era. Of course, it's a digital camera, so it has a sensor inside. What is a mirrorless camera? Well, a top mirrorless camera of today might look something like this, which is a Sony A7R. Actually, this is old by today's standards. The latest would probably be the A9 or whatever is out there today, but anyway, this has enough features that I could use for comparison. Basically, if you look inside, there is no mirror. What you're looking at is the sensor, and boy, does she look colorful, doesn't she? Right, so anyway, okay, so I am going to talk to you guys a little bit about the pros and cons of the DSLR versus mirrorless cameras. Now, before I go further, there is one other mirrorless type of camera, which would be the rangefinder camera, but that's actually in another category altogether, so I'm not really counting the rangefinder as a mirrorless camera, although the modern digital rangefinder could technically be considered a mirrorless camera. Let's take a look at the pros and cons now. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are just so many, but I did write an article, and if you are interested in all the pros and cons that I could come up with, check it out in the link below. But I'm just going to go through some that stand out in my head. Okay, so a pro for the digital SLR for me would be the optical viewfinder, because there's nothing quite like a real view. Okay, I'm old school anyway, but ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. Ain't nothing like the real thing. Oh no. I mean, in my opinion, when you're looking through a beautiful optical viewfinder, it's a glorious thing, you know. I mean, and I have to admit, not all digital SLRs have the best optical viewfinders, but if you are using like a top camera, the optical viewfinders are usually very good or excellent. Another pro for the digital SLR for me would be the handling. Now, this one is probably bigger than what most people would want to use, but the standard digital SLR, I feel that they handle better than the mirrorless cameras, because the mirrorless cameras are a bit on the small side. Even for me, I don't have the largest hands in the world, but I feel that these bigger cameras handle a lot better. Another pro for me would be the digital SLR handles really well with larger lenses, longer lenses. Another pro for the digital SLR, battery life is usually better. Maybe not on this one, because this uses an older battery system, but on the modern digital SLRs, the battery life is usually a little bit better because the camera doesn't need batteries for everything, meaning that it doesn't need to supply the optical system with power. Whereas on a mirrorless camera like this one, in which the viewfinder is electronic, the battery has to supply power to everything in the mirrorless camera. Okay, and another great asset for the digital SLR for me would be the availability of tons of legacy lenses that you can put on, and by that I mean there's just so many from the original manufacturer to the off-brands, so you always have a great choice of prices, so that's really a big positive. Now let's just quickly talk about some of the positives of the modern day mirrorless camera. Now, why do I like mirrorless cameras? Well, I like using legacy glass. So for example, I have right here a Contax Zeiss 50mm f1.5 sonar lens. Okay, so the great thing with a mirrorless camera is, on a camera like this, the electronic viewfinder offers focus peaking, which I find very, very helpful when using legacy glass, especially fast glass. So basically, if you don't know what focus peaking is, look it up. But I'm going to try to tell you just a little bit. Okay, so let's say, for example, I'm focusing on something. Usually the screen will light up in red, or you can probably have it light up in white, and the part where you're trying to get in focus begins to get crispy. Is the word I like to use, crispy, and that tells you that it's in focus. Now, before that, before they had focus peaking, you either had to eyeball it, which is the old-fashioned way, or you had a focus confirmation. Sometimes you can get an adapter with a focus confirmation chip, but in all honesty, when you're focusing in the dark, or not in the dark, but when you're focusing in low light or available light, sometimes the focus confirmation is not always accurate, certainly not as accurate as the focus peaking. Another thing I like about mirrorless cameras is when you're focusing in low light or available light, the electronic viewfinder or the LCD will gain up, kind of like in a video camera, so it makes it easier for you to see, you know, in dim conditions. That's another great thing about mirrorless cameras. Another great asset for mirrorless cameras is because there is no mirror between the lens and the sensor, it is easier for you to get a wide range of adapters to use with legacy glass. You know, legacy, I'm talking about lots of manufacturers: Canon, Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, Leica, all that stuff, Contax. So you're able to use a lot of different glass, whereas a camera that has a mirror in it sometimes prevents that from happening. That's why in a lot of digital SLRs, if you notice, like on the Nikons, you could only put but so many adapters for the digital SLRs, whereas on a mirrorless camera, without that mirror inside, the lens could go in a little deeper, you know, and so that opens up more options for adapters for adaptable lenses. Okay, so another great asset for that. There's probably more, but I'm not going to go into everything, as I said in the link. If you look at this right now, the most obvious difference is this weight. This is heavy. It's a heavy piece of machinery to be carrying around all day long. This is in comparison much lighter. Okay, now I will admit, when I was younger, maybe about 10-15 years ago, I easily carried one of these all day long because it made me feel badass. You know, I used to joke with my photographer friends and I used to say, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Big camera, big lens equals big. Anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. That's why those guys were always walking around with these big badass cameras. But today is a whole different story, because today the power that you can get from those big ass digital SLRs you can easily get in these little mirrorless cameras. So why is the market shifting from this to this? Okay, well, let me just say one thing, okay? Aside from anything else, I just want to say that I don't know if you guys remember ever reading those books or seeing those shows about how these corporate giants control all of us. And in my opinion, I believe that is true, because let's face it, if they really wanted us to love this, they would be pushing this more. And that is why we've had these huge big ass cameras for years and years, because the big dogs, Canon and Nikon, were always pushing these cameras. And why did they do that? Well, first of all, especially in their pro models, I believe it was a showpiece for them. It was big, badass, powerful, and you know, they were actually comfortable making these kind of cameras, you know. And so the only reason really that it's shifting to this is because this is being pushed a lot in the press, and also people actually like them. People like these mirrorless cameras. You know, they make a lot of sense because let's face it, the majority of the people today are actually taking pictures with their cell phones. So the smaller you can make them, the easier it will be for somebody to actually want to buy them and to actually want to use them. So basically, is the DSLR gonna go extinct? Well, in my opinion, if we don't see a Nikon D6 or a Canon 1DX Mark III, maybe by the Olympics or in a couple of years, then probably yes, then these big badass professional digital SLRs will probably be going extinct. But I don't think that that is the end of the digital SLR per se. In my opinion, the digital SLR will probably survive a lot longer than people might expect in this form. And what is this? This is a Canon Rebel SL1, and I'm not just talking about this particular camera, I'm talking about these small digital SLRs, because if you look at the sales, these cameras by far the most popular sellers amongst serious cameras, and the reason for that, they make a lot of sense. They are very light, they're almost as small as the mirrorless cameras, and the reason and the way they're able to do that is, I guess, by using cheaper materials, cheaper mirrors, smaller prisms, things like that. But I do believe that there is absolutely room for this to coexist with this. Alright, so even though I count myself as one of those who predict that the big badass digital SLRs, the professional types, may soon go extinct, I still have a soft spot for them. So in my head, I have visions of the day when these big badass digital cameras will rise again, and then they will say, "What you gonna do, you wimpy little mirrorless camera, when this camera legend and this camera legend run wild on you?"
Cameralegend.com